Chapter 2 A 4-Day Planet by H. Beam Piper. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 4-Day Planet. Chapter 2 Reporter Working. Bish came over and greeted us solemnly.
"Good afternoon, gentlemen. Captain Ahab, I believe," he said, bowing to Tom, who seemed slightly puzzled. The education Tom had been digging out for himself was technical rather than literary. "And Mr. Pulitzer, or is it Horace Greeley?"
"Lord Beaverbrook, Your Grace," I replied. "Have you any little news items for us from your diocese?" Bish teetered slightly, getting out a cigar and inspecting it carefully before lighting it.
"Well," he said carefully, "my diocese is full to the hatch-covers with sinners, but that's scarcely news."
He turned to Tom.
"One of your hands on the javelin got into a fight in Martian Joe's a while ago. Lumped the other man up pretty badly."
He named the javelin crewman and the man who had been pounded. The latter was one of Steve Ravic's goons.
"But not fatally, I regret to say," Bish added. "The local Gestapo are looking for your man, but he made it aboard Nip Spazzoni's bulldog, and by this time he's halfway to Herman Roich's land."
"Isn't Nip going to the meeting tonight?" Tom asked.
Bish shook his head. "Nip is a peace-loving man. He has a well-founded suspicion that peace is going to be in short supply around Hunter's Hall this evening. You know, of course, that Leo Belcher's coming in on the Peenemünde and will be there to announce another price cut. The new price, I understand, will be 35 centisols a pound."
700 sols a ton, I thought. Why, that would barely pay ship expenses.
"Where did you get that?"
Tom asked, a trifle sharply.
"Oh, I have my spies and informers," Bish said. "And even if I hadn't, it would figure. The only reason Leo Belcher ever comes to this Eden among planets is to negotiate a new contract, and who ever heard of a new contract at a higher price?"
That had all happened before, a number of times. When Steve Ravic had gotten control of the Hunters Cooperative, the price of tallow wax on the loading floor at Port Sandor Spaceport had been 1,500 sols a ton. As far as Dad and I could find out, it was still bringing the same price on Terra as it always had. It looked to us as if Ravic and Leo Belcher, who was the co-op representative on Terra, and Mort Hallstock were simply pocketing the difference. I was just as sore about what was happening as anybody who went out in the Hunter ships. Tallow wax is our only export. All our imports are paid for with credit from the sale of wax. It isn't really wax, and it isn't tallow. It's a growth on the Jarvis's sea monster. There's a layer of it under the skin and around organs that need padding. An average-sized monster, say 150 feet long, will yield 12 to 15 tons of it, and a good hunter kills about 10 monsters a year. Well, at the price Belcher and Ravic were going to cut from, that would run a little short of 150,000 sols for a year. If you say it quick enough, and don't think, that sounds like big money. But the upkeep and supplies for a hunter ship are big money too, and what's left over after that's paid off is divided, on a graduated scale, among 10 to 15 men, from the captain down. A hunter boat captain, even a good one like Joe Kyvelson, won't make more in a year than Dad and I make out of the Times. Chemically, tallow wax isn't like anything else in the known galaxy. The molecules are huge. They can be seen with an ordinary optical microscope, and a microscopically visible molecule is a curious-looking object, to say the least. They use the stuff to treat fabric for protective garments. It isn't anything like collapsium, of course, but a suit of waxed coveralls weighing only a couple of pounds will stop as much radiation as half an inch of lead. Back when they were getting 1,500 a ton, the Hunters had been making good money, but that was before Steve Ravic's time. It was slightly before mine, too. Steve Ravik had showed up on Ferris about 12 years ago. He'd had some money, and he'd bought shares in a couple of hunter ships and staked a few captains who had had bad luck and got them in debt to him. He also got in with Morton Hallstock, who controlled what some people were credulous enough to take for a government here. Before long, he was secretary of the Hunters Cooperative. Old Simon McGregor, who had been president then, was a good hunter, but he was no businessman. He came to depend very heavily on Ravik, up till his ship, the Claymore, was lost with all hands down in Fitzwilliam Straits. I think that was a time bomb in the magazine, but I have a low and suspicious mind. Professor Hartzenbosch has told me so repeatedly. After that, Steve Ravik was president of the co-op. He immediately began a drive to increase the membership. Most of the new members had never been out in a hunter ship in their lives, but they could all be depended on to vote the way he wanted them to. First, he jacked the price of wax up, which made everybody but the wax buyers happy. Everybody who wasn't already in the co-op hurried up and joined. Then he negotiated an exclusive contract with Capstad Chemical Products Limited in South Africa, by which they agreed to take the entire output for the co-op. That ended competitive wax buying, and when there was nobody to buy the wax but Capstad, you had to sell it through the cooperative, or you didn't sell it at all. After that, the price started going down. The cooperative, for which read Steve Ravik, had a sales representative on Terra, Leo Belcher. He wrote all the contracts, collected all the money, and split with Ravik. What was going on was pretty generally understood, even if it couldn't be proven. But what could anybody do about it? Maybe somebody would try to do something about it at the meeting this evening. I would be there to cover it. I was beginning to wish I owned a bulletproof vest. Bish and Tom were exchanging views on the subject, some of them almost printable. I had my eyes to my binoculars, watching the tugs go up to meet the Payneminda. "What we need for Ravik, Hallstock, and Belcher," Tom was saying, "is about 4 fathoms of harpoon line apiece, and something to haul up to." That kind of talk would have shocked Dad. He is very strong for law and order, even when there is no order and the law itself is illegal. I'd always thought there was a lot of merit in what Tom was suggesting. Bish Ware seemed to have his doubts, though.
No, there ought to be some better way of doing it than that."
"Can you think of one?" Tom challenged. I didn't hear Bish's reply. By that time, the tugs were almost to the ship. I grabbed up the telephoto camera and aimed it. It has its own power unit and transmits directly. In theory, I could tune it to the telecast station and put what I was getting right on the air, and what I was doing was transmitting to the Times, to be recorded and cast later. Because it's not 100% reliable, though, it makes its own audio-visual record, so if any of what I was sending didn't get through, it could be spliced in after I got back. I got some footage of the tugs grappling the ship, which was now completely weightless, and pulling her down. Through the finder, I could see that she had her landing legs extended. She looked like a big, overfed spider being hauled in by a couple of gnats. I kept the butt of the camera to my shoulder, and whenever anything interesting happened, I'd squeeze the trigger. The first time I ever used a real submachine gun had been to kill a blue slasher that had gotten into one of the ship pools at the waterfront. I used 3 one-second bursts, and threw bits of slasher all over the place, and everybody wondered how I'd gotten the practice. A couple more boats, pushers, went up to help hold the ship against the wind, and by that time she was down to 1,000 feet, which was half her diameter. I switched from the shoulder-stock telephoto to the big tripod job, because this was the best part of it. The ship was weightless, of course, but she had mass, and an awful lot of it. If anybody goofed getting her down, she'd take the side of the landing pit out, and about 10% of the population of Fenris, including the ace reporter for the Times, along with it. At the same time, some workmen and a couple of spaceport cops had appeared, taken out a section of railing and put in a gate. The Peeneminda settled down, turned slowly to get her port in line with the gate, and lurched off contragravity and began running out a bridge to the promenade. I got some shots of that, and then began packing my stuff back in the hamper. "You going aboard?" Tom asked. "Can I come along? I can carry some of your stuff and let on I'm your helper." Glory be, I thought. I finally got that apprentice. "Why, sure," I said. "You tow the hamper. I'll carry this." I got out what looked like a big camera case and slung it over my shoulder. "But you'll have to take me out on the Javelin sometime and let me shoot a monster." He said it was a deal, and we shook on it. Then I had another idea. "Bish, suppose you come with us too," I said. "After all, Tom and I are just a couple of kids, and if you're with us, it'll look a lot more big paperish." That didn't seem to please Tom too much. Bish shook his head, though, and Tom brightened. "I'm dreadfully sorry, Walt," Bish said, "but I'm going aboard myself to see a friend who is en route through to Odin, a Dr. Watson. I haven't seen him for years." I'd caught that name, too, when we got in the passenger list. Dr. John Watson. Now I know that all sorts of people call themselves doctor, and Watson and John aren't too improbable a combination. But I'd read Sherlock Holmes long ago, and the name had caught my attention. And this was the first, to my knowledge, that Bish Ware had ever admitted to any off-planet connections. We started over to the gate. Hallstock and Ravik were ahead of us. So was Sigurd Ngazori, the president of the Fidelity and Trust, carrying a heavy briefcase and accompanied by a character with a submachine gun, and Adolf Lautier and Professor Hartzenbosch. There were a couple of spaceport cops at the gate, in olive-green uniforms that looked as though they had been sprayed on, and steel helmets. I wished we had a city police force like that. They were Odin Dock and Shipyard Company men, all former Federation Regular Army or Colonial Constabulary. The spaceport wasn't part of Port Sandor, or even Fenris. The Odin Dock and Shipyard Company was the government there, and it was run honestly and efficiently. They knew me, and when they saw Tom towing my hamper, they cracked a few jokes about the New Times cub reporter and waved us through. I thought they might give Bish an argument, but they just nodded and let him pass too. We all went out onto the bridge and across the pit to the equator of the 2,000-foot globular ship. We went into the main lounge, and the captain introduced us to Mr. Glenn Morrell. He was fairly tall, with light gray hair, prematurely so, I thought, and a pleasant, non-committal face. I'd have pegged him for a businessman. Well, I suppose authoring is a business, if that was his business. He shook hands with us and said, "Aren't you rather young to be a newsman?" I started to burn on that. I get it all the time, and it burns me all the time, but worst of all on the job. Maybe I am only going on 18, but I'm doing a man's work, and I'm doing it competently. "Well, they grow up young on Fenris, Mr. Morrell." Captain Marshak earned my gratitude by putting in, "Either that, or they don't live to grow up." Morrell unhooked his memophone and repeated the captain's remark into it. Opening line for one of his chapters. Then he wanted to know if I'd been born on Fenris. I saw I was going to have to get firm with Mr. Morrell right away. The time to stop that sort of thing is as soon as it starts. "Who," I wanted to know, "is interviewing whom? You'll have at least 500 hours till the next possible ship out of here. I only have 2.5 to my next deadline. You want coverage, don't you? The more publicity you get, the easier your own job's going to be." Then I introduced Tom, carefully giving the impression that while I handled all ordinary assignments, I needed help to give him the full VIP treatment. We went over to a quiet corner and sat down, and the interview started. The camera case I was carrying was a snare and a deceit. Everybody knows that reporters use recorders in interviews, but it never pays to be too obtrusive about them, or the subject gets recorder conscious and stiffens up. What I had was better than a recorder. It was a recording radio. Like the audio-visuals, it not only transmitted into the times, but made a recording as insurance against transmission failure. I reached into a slit on the side and snapped on the switch while I was fumbling with a pencil and notebook with the other hand, and started by asking him what had decided him to do a book about Fenris. After that, I fed a question every now and then to keep him running, and only listened to every third word. The radio was doing a better job than I possibly could have. At the same time, I was watching Steve Ravik, Morton Hallstock, and Leo Belcher at one side of the room, and Bish Ware at the other. Bish was within ear-straining range. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw another man, younger in appearance and looking like an army officer in civvies, approach him. "My dear Bishop," this man said in greeting. As far as I knew, that nickname had originated on Fenris. I made a mental note of that. "How are you?" Bish replied, grasping the other man's hand. "You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive." That did it. I told you I was an old Sherlock Holmes reader. I recognized that line. This meeting was prearranged. Neither of them had ever met before, and they needed a recognition code. Then I returned to Morrell, and decided to wonder about Bish Ware and Dr. Watson later. It wasn't long before I was noticing a few odd things about Morrell, too, which confirmed my original suspicions of him. He didn't have the firm name of his alleged publishers right. He didn't know what a literary agent was, and, after claiming to have been a newsman, he consistently used the expression news service. I know everybody says that. Everybody but newsmen. They always call a news service a paper, especially when talking to other newsmen. Of course, there isn't any paper connected with it except the pad the editor doodles on. What gets to the public is photoprint, out of a teleprinter. As small as our circulation is, we have 400 or 500 of them in Port Sandor and around among the small settlements in the archipelago, and even on the mainland. Most of them are in bars and cafes and cigar stores and places like that, operated by a coin in a slot and leased by the proprietor, and some of the big hunter ships like Joe Kivelson's Javelin and Nip Spazzoni's Bulldog have them. But long ago, back in the first centuries, pre-atomic and atomic era, they were actually printed on paper, and the copies distributed and sold. They used printing presses as heavy as a spaceship's engines. That's why we still call ourselves the press. Some of the old papers on Terra, like the Prensa in Buenos Aires and the Melbourne Times, which used to be the London Times when there was still a London, were printed that way originally. Finally, I got through with my interview, and then shot about 15 minutes of audiovisual, which would be cut to 5 for the cast. By this time, Bish and Dr. Watson had disappeared, I suppose to the ship's bar, and Ravik and his accomplices had gotten through with their conspiracy to defraud the hunters. I turned Morrell over to Tom, and went over to where they were standing together. I'd put away my pencil and pad long ago with Morrell. Now I got them out ostentatiously as I approached. "Good day, gentlemen," I greeted them. "I'm representing the Port Sandor Times." "Oh, run along, Sonny. We haven't time to bother with you," Hallstock said. "But I want to get a story from Mr. Belcher," I began. Well, come back in 5 or 6 years, when you're dry behind the ears, and you can get it," Ravik told me. "Our readers aren't interested in the condition of my ears," I said sweetly. "They want to read about the price of tallow wax. What's this about another price cut? To 35 centisols a pound, I understand?" "Oh, Steve, the young man's from the news service, and his father will publish whatever he brings home," Belcher argued. "We'd better give him something." He turned to me. "I don't know how this got out, but it's quite true," he said. He had a long face, like a horse's. At least, he looked like pictures of horses I'd seen. As he spoke, he pulled it even longer and became as doleful as an undertaker at a 10,000-soul funeral. "The price has gone down again. Somebody has developed a synthetic substitute. Of course, it isn't anywhere near as good as real Fenris tallow wax, but try and tell the public that. So, Capstad Chemical's being undersold, and the only way they can stay in business is cut the price they have to pay for wax." It went on like that, and this time I had real trouble keeping my anger down. In the first place, I was pretty sure there was no substitute for Fenris tallow wax, good, bad, or indifferent. In the second place, it isn't sold to the gullible public. It's sold to equipment manufacturers who have their own test engineers and who have to keep their products up to legal safety standards. He didn't know this balderdash of his was going straight to the Times as fast as he spouted it. He thought I was taking it down in shorthand. I knew exactly what Dad would do with it. He'd put it on telecast in Belcher's own voice. Maybe the monster hunters would start looking around for a rope then. When I got through listening to him, I went over and got a short audio-visual of Captain Marshak of the Peenemünde for the cast, and then I rejoined Tom and Morell. "Mr. Morell says he's staying with you at the Times," Tom said. He seemed almost as disappointed as Professor Hartzenbosch. I wondered, for an incredulous moment, if Tom had been trying to kidnap Morell away from me. "He wants to go out on the Javelin with us for a monster hunt." "Well, that's swell," I said. "You can pay off on that promise to take me monster hunting, too. Right now, Mr. Morell is my big story." I reached into the front pocket of my camera case for the handphone to shift to two-way. "I'll call the Times and have somebody come up with a car to get us and Mr. Morell's luggage." "Oh, I have a car. Jeep, that is," Tom said. "It's down on the bottom level. We can use that." Funny place to leave a car. And I was sure that he and Morell had come to some kind of an understanding, while I was being lied to by Belcher. I didn't get it. There was just too much going on around me that I didn't get. And me, I'm supposed to be the razor-sharp news-hawk who gets everything. End of Chapter 2.